I'm really excited by your film because I remember years ago, as you certainly did, watching the HBO documentaries. And I was so drawn by this horrific but fascinating character. But what drew me most was the duality of him. Was that something that automatically drew you too?
I think you should have directed this film, my friend. This is exactly what drew me in. No, good mind thinks the same. I mean, I honestly had the same exact experience. I was sitting down at the time with a few friends, and I remember that it was haunting me. I was waking up in the morning, and the first thing I felt, I was like, why I feel for this guy? And that kind of what drove me to watch it again. But and then I realized, obviously, you're right, it's the duality. This whole film is about duality. It's about those characters that living dual life. Something that we are suffocated in our society with, that people they have duality in themselves. There's certain levels of sociopathism among us.
Yeah, and I guess, all of us to a certain extent, we behave, in one way or another, behave differently in different groups of people. We all have a sense of duality to ourselves, but what is
that's an extreme one?
Yeah, that's the definition of sociopath when it's taken to that extreme. But there seemed to me to be, at least in the interviews in these documentaries, almost a bragging of what he had done. There didn't seem to be any remorse, and yet he felt very sensitive about his family.
Well, I have a few theories on that. My first theory is I think that he became the Iceman in his own mind when they were filming part of that documentary, because there were two parts. There was one part in 1991 that was done by Gene Tebow, and then the second part by Sheila Nevins, and both by HBO, but that second one was in 2001, and then there was another special with a psychiatrist in 2003. Yeah. And I think what happened after the first one, which I based many of my writing on the first outtake of 19 hours outtakes that you didn't see, when I created the story, because he was more terrified, he was more humble, he was actually more emotional. And then when you see him later down the road in the documentaries, in the 2001 and 2003 segments, what it was very interesting to see that he became the Iceman for the last decade in his head. And he's basically starting to take, I think, credit for so many murders that he never committed, like Jimmy Hoffa, for instance. He said that he's been there, I'm surprised that he didn't claim that he was part of the Kennedy's assassination. You know what I mean? He was living in his own lie, because that's what the sociopath lives. He lives in a fantasy world. And the fantasy world of Richard Kuklinski that was so fascinating for me is the fact that he wanted to have a family. This guy really wanted to be normal, really wanted to have the existence if he could just do it. But I think because he was so sick, because he was so, torn apart within him, he just didn't have those feelings, and he literally went to kill to provide. He didn't get any arousement for this killing. He didn't enjoy those killings. He didn't get any satisfaction. I'm sure there was certain empowerment that you needed, because it's true that he became his violence went towards his family when he was not in the field. But I think it was more the adrenaline and rush that you developed addiction to. But in the end of the day, this guy want to live the American dream. He did it to killing, but that was his. Barry Madoff did the same thing.
Yeah, it was a job to provide for his family, and it just happened to be a terribly immoral job.
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, that in his psychotic mind, that's what he was thinking. And this is why, in the interview, when he's bragging about all those killings, and in his book as well, later down 2006, you need to really find out what's the truth. And we really try to go with this movie to, I went to New Jersey State Police, and I interviewed as much as I can, and I tried to cross examination between what things he said to other references. And I got to tell you, we try to be as true as we could to the true story, because I don't think nobody really knows all the truth in this case. Yeah.
Tell me, you mentioned the 19 hours of outtakes that you got a hold of from those documentaries. What didn't we see, because we're not privy to those outtakes, what didn't we see that was particularly revealing about him?
You know, there was one moment that I caught that I just, you're bringing me back, a few years ago. There was a great moment that I would never forget. It's a moment that he's waiting for Jim Tebow to come up with a question. And he's just looking around, and then he's starting to make a few, funny comments, he was talking about Jim's suit. It's like, where did you get the suit from? And they just had a little bit of while Jim is looking through his pages and Richard's just talking to him, and really it was a really almost a conversation between two regular men. And then he raises his arm and he was asking one of the crew members, and he's like, would it be so kind of you if you can just get me a cup of coffee? And the guy asked him, how are you drinking your coffee? And he's like, I'm trying to cut on. He basically just cream. He didn't take sugar in his coffee. And he was thinking, go back and thinking about this interview, and he was and suddenly there was a little bit of a scared, because he knows that at the next door next to him there were 3 FBI agents that listening to the recording. Because the meaning of the first recording, it was an undercover basically work of Jim Tebow to basically trying to get some information for the families of where some of the bodies that he might be claimed killing are.
Wow.
That's how the documentary even started. So when I saw the little human side of him, and I was like, it was captivated me. I couldn't stay ignorant, you got it out of the edit.
What also excites me about your film is the casting of Michael Shannon. I mean, Michael Shannon is one of our great actors, and he's incredibly intense, and there's also an element of mystery about him that I think works extremely well for this character.
I cannot agree more. Again, I saw Michael Shannon in a few films. The Revolutionary Road was something that I caught my eyes to Michael Shannon, and I started to research and saw other films that he's done. And I saw something about him that I knew that he's going to bring it naturally to the screen that nobody, or maybe a few other actors, of course, can bring, but he has definitely that ability of bringing the natural darkness. My challenge with Michael was okay, now how do we balancing it? How do we balancing it and bringing it into, that duality because you bring the darkness where so many actors are phoning it when they're acting. So you bring that, but how do you bring that? And then, we're starting to go into places that Michael went into places that, that he's related to his own family, to his wife, to his daughter, that he's really connected to. And that's really helped him to really go there. And we split the shooting between family and killing, so then we have that duality really separated almost when we're filming it. So I was fighting for Michael Shannon. I did a test scene with him. I was running all around Hollywood. Nobody wanted to find the film. Michael Shannon. So after we did the test, only eventually Avi Lerner and Millennium Films, were believing in the concept. It's like, go. We're not going to give you much money, but go make the movie.
Yeah. Tell me about, because you wrote and directed this film.
And
so tell me, and produced, yes, sir. So when you're in the director's chair, is it difficult to kind of take off your writer's hat and allow them to veer off script at all, or create moments that aren't necessarily written in your screenplay? Is that difficult?
It's a process, because the way I write with my writing partner Morgan Land is that I'm kind of directing the film while I'm writing. So I kind of never really put my director hat away. I'm a foreigner in this country, so obviously my English is not as bad as it could be. And Morgan is brilliant. He's a brilliant English, and so we kind of we directing and co-writing those things together, and that's kind of our process. So for me to continue and being at that level on the set, it's just I'm just playing with the real tools that I didn't envision while I was writing, which is the cameras, which is the actors, which is the props, which is the sets and everything. But that's the only way I can do it when I'm co-writing and directing. The producing part of this movie was a little bit more complicated, but I had my partner, Ev Bleiberg, who is an amazing producer, who really, really protected me and protected the film and really gave his heart and soul. And we were just, when you have that team, but I still need to make a lot of producerial decisions while I'm directing. But I like it because it just gives you, and you're part of everything.
Yeah.
Just like, a guy that's running a department and need to fight any politics about what is the real budget or how much money do I really get and why the extras had to be released. And you know what I mean? You're actually aware of those decisions. It can distract you a little bit because you don't have much time because you got to shoot the whole film in 30 days. But it also gives you an involvement of understanding of where you can improvise better and where you need to come up with new ideas how to shoot things that will blend into the movie you're trying to make.
Yeah. Speaking of shooting your movie, a while back we did a series on the art of cinematography where we invited a lot of cinematographers to the show, and we invited Bobby Bukowski to the show, and we interviewed him, and the following morning is when he was going to start on your film.
Oh wow!
Yeah, as luck would have it. So he was very excited about it. So obviously, us having a kind of a relationship with Bobby, I wanted to know about the process of working with him.
Well, Bobby Bukowski is obviously is a real artist. He belongs to that cinematographers that not necessarily you're going to find them on every blockbuster movie or big visual effects. Bobby is a very intimate, stories that he likes to be a part of, and he's always, succeeding in portraying those stories very well. No matter what the director or the script says, that's his attraction. I think with me and Bobby, we really completed each other because I have a certain style that I'm trying to enforce with me, and Bobby has a certain style. So we were always challenging each other. I think in the end of the day, the results are great, but the process that we've been through, it was challenging because I had a kind of a rule that I don't want to go under 50mm lenses, and Bobby he loves 35 millimeters. And so there was on set, we have to kind of say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this. But in terms of lighting it and giving your heart and soul, Bukowski is an amazing asset to have around.
Yeah, he is incredible. Tell me about the family of Kuklinski. Did you make any efforts to get in touch with them, or was that kind of just unnecessary?
Well, that was a very sensitive. It was a very sensitive situation because the family kind of made a decision. I think after 2006. To stay after they did there was a big splash of a lot of media, and they did the Larry King live, and they went all over the place. In 2006 they were all over the media, and then in 2007 they kind of decided this is not what they want to do. And his older daughter Merrick, she's living in New York, and she doesn't want to be part of anything anymore. And her mother, living in New Jersey, she didn't want Sonny to be any part of the media. Anyway, they kind of got, I think, kind of a backlash. So we didn't have at all an access to them. Only after I finished the movie, that his daughter contacted me, and then his wife contacted me, and then this is basically where I started my Facebook relationship with them. And we spoke on the phone a few times, and it's always very good terms. And I told them what I tried to portray, because, I took whatever I read, whatever I heard, whatever, they said in their interview in the documentary. His wife was interviewed in the 19 Hours Outtakes. I saw also a lot of amazing things that nobody else seen.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry.
Does it make you nervous when they'll finally watch the movie for themselves? Does that idea kind of make you nervous?
No, because look, we screened the movie in Colorado in a festival called Telluride, and it was incredibly received. And then we screened it in Venice Film Festival, in Toronto, and so many others. So I know that the Vail crowd will probably have a jam of watching a good movie about duality. The story of a guy that was, a hitman for the mob for 18 years and was the most successful and worked for the Lucchese's and Gambinos and of course for the Gambinos and came back home and was a good dad and trying to be a good husband, trying to be functioning in an economic strength and, make sure that he's driving, a Cadillac, make sure that he's having a nice house, make sure that everything that he wanted to have when he was a child and was an abused child, that he's not providing it. His daughters got nothing but love from him. Now, there's a few stories, controversy stories, that he was very violent at home towards his wife. Well, those stories are kind of controversial because in the early 90s, when in the court manuscripts and everywhere else, there was almost never mentioning to a physical violence. There was a few mentioning to some kind of a domestic violence, which I'm also portrayed in the film, but there was no mentioning of like we were under a gun, locked in a basement, and we were hostages. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm,
There was never that. And then in Philip Kahlo's book in 2006, and after that, in the media, they kind of like the portraying is like we are victims. So I don't know. Maybe they were not. But I chose to take one story when I believe that people are 18 years in a home. You know, I believe that there was some kind of a harmony that kept everybody still with good memories, at least from the daughter side. You know?
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
So that's the point of view that I chose to take, and you know, if they really think that this is not the case anymore, then you know, well, we're gonna make Iceman 2.
Well, before I let you go, I wanted to ask this about the Iceman because, I mean, it's obvious from hearing you talk that you've done so much research on it, and you've lived with this project for so long. Is it hard to let go of a film when the journey ends?
You know, the movie is coming out to the theaters on May 3rd, and you know, when you are in the marketing meetings and everything, and you kind of like seeing like all those departments, like, you know, talking about, you know, something that you had just an idea one day. You don't let it go. You just transfer it. You know what I mean? You just put it out there, and you hope that people will have the same experience that you wanted them to have. Mm-hmm. And if they connect it, look, some people will love, some people will probably not like, and some people will say it was okay. You know, it's the meaning of art. You can't please everybody. But I'm very proud of the movie, and I think that the majority of the people that are watching this film, you know, coming out, and they had a great, interesting experience.